Welcome, beautiful Paris Saint-Germain family. A lot of people are wondering what happened to Paris Saint-Germain. They were nearly knocked out and grouped from the Champions League and now look like one of the best teams in the world, and I'm here to fully explain everything. The Champions League campaign starts off versus Girona, and Paris Saint-Germain have an extremely lackluster game versus Girona until the end of the game where Nuno Mendes somehow manages to put the ball into the net, and Paris Saint-Germain advancing to 10th place in the Champions League. It was a disgusting performance, and my reaction throughout the entire game, especially in that first half, showed the holes, the gaps. I saw something that I didn't see before. I saw something that I wasn't happy with. I saw something I couldn't explain to myself what I just saw. Look at this mid-press we're doing. What are we doing, man? This was supposed to be champagne football. What the fuck are we doing? The thing is, Lucci should be blamed here as well, because he's probably telling the players, oh, pass it around the back until Girona presses you. Well, have you told him about plan B? What happens when Girona does not press us? Because they're bitches as well. They want to park. What the fuck has Lucci told the players to do this game? Has he told them you win the game by passing between Nuno, Pacho, Marquinhos? Is that how we will get points? Is that how we score a goal? I'm still trying to think. But not Lucho. Lucho is the real up here. Lucho is an enemy of the club for this game. Next UCL game, we were heading to the Emirates facing Arsenal with some of a depleted squad, with Ousmane Dembélé, our main man, missing that game due to some problems between him and Luis Enrique. Paris Saint-Germain started off the game somewhat well, but two early goals in the first half cemented the defeat for Paris Saint-Germain, and we dropped down all the way to 18th place. And after these two performances, after these two results, questions started raising. I wondered, what is wrong? Something is wrong, and majority of the blame was not on the players. Sure, we could have done better from some opportunities, but the performances and the tactics heading into the game, which is by the manager, Luis Enrique, something just wasn't right. Something just wasn't right, and I couldn't really understand it. Third game of the UCL campaign was versus PSV, and Paris Saint-Germain had to come back with a reaction. The performances, the results we have seen had to stop. It was against an inferior side, once again at the Parc, similar to Girona. But Paris Saint-Germain once again made an easy game, extremely difficult, and only managing to get a 1-1 draw versus PSV. And at this point, I was like, all right, now we do have to be extremely critiqueful. I was critiqueful ever since the Girona game. I put Luis Enrique on fraud watch because I felt the majority of the blame was set on him. Do I excuse any of the Ousmane Dembélé, Bradley Barcola misses? Do I excuse any of the Marquinhos, Donnarumma mistakes? Absolutely not. But I always focus on the majority problem. What is the biggest thing we can solve so the more problems get solved? You always focus on number one. Instead of trying to fix many problems and critiquing everyone, I critique the one that deserves the most critique, which was Luis Enrique after that game. And Paris Saint-Germain dropped down all the way to 17th place with only 4 points. Next up came a home game versus Atletico Madrid. Paris Saint-Germain, after only getting 4 points out of 9 points in their first 3 games, had to do something in this game. We had to win this game. It was a comfortable game against Atletico Madrid, who at that time were in terrible form, losing their last Champions League game 4-0 to Benfica away. And Paris Saint-Germain started off the game finally brilliantly, getting a goal only 40 minutes in. Atletico Madrid quickly scored and then managed to get the dub at the end of the game. And this, khalas, it was over. I was Lucho out at this point. I felt Luis Enrique had 4 games, 4 big... Luis Enrique has to leave this club. But again, me saying this is absolutely pointless. I'm just saying this to... Yeah, this is how I feel. I don't see us... Yeah. It's not going to work. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. We might give this as long as time as possible, but it's not going to work. And Lucho doesn't deserve time. Lucho doesn't deserve time. Because if Lucho cared, he would have made adjustments. He hasn't made a single adjustment. But just the play, there's no directness. We win the ball high up, win the ball in the middle. We always look to pass it back. Always recycle possession. Big opportunities, and he couldn't. He just couldn't fix it. Sure, in Ligue 1, we were still first place, but that is expected. When you look at The quality that we have compared to the other quality, and there really isn't any pressure in Liga 1 because we've won the Liga 1 countless of times. Pretty much every single player in the squad had already won the Liga 1 so many times and performed well in Liga 1. The pressure just isn't there. In the Champions League, obviously, there's a tons of pressure. But this is where we finally got the answers to the questions we had been asking for. Because I felt it's impossible that only me as a spectator was seeing this. Are the players not complaining? Is anyone in the club complaining? This came out. Lucho's game plan are starting to irritate many players. Last year, Kylian didn't really apply the instructions imposed by the coach, so the players had more freedom on the pitch. On the other hand, this season, he's uncompromising about what he expects from the players, and this in each position, and several players in the squad feel restricted. For example, he asks very specific things from the offensive player, which leaves room for their freedom. If the instructions are not respected, the players are directly reprimanded, whether in the locker room or during video work. For example, he doesn't want to the attackers take the depths, so we have offensive players who are used against register. However, several players in the squad believe that the team is much more dangerous when the game plan is not respected and the attackers gain depth and have freedom. The problem, Lucho doesn't want a transition game and absolutely wants a possession game no matter the opponent. The fact of not seeing the attackers take the depth is also due to the instruction from Lucho precisely. So we can take away from this is Paris Saint-Germain last season played Luis Enrique's possession football, but there was way more freedom and there wasn't as much strictness, especially when it comes to the attackers, because Kylian Mbappe was there. If Mbappe is not going to respect the instructions, nobody's going to respect them, so he left the game a bit open. But with Kylian Mbappe's departure, he was like, alright, I finally have a 30-man squad of slaves who will do exactly what I want. But luckily, as you can see by the report, it's not one player, it's not two players, it's not three players, it's many players complaining against Luis Enrique. This also answered some of the questions why Dembélé was left out of the squad versus Arsenal, because he was the main man complaining versus Luis Enrique. Privately, in recent months, Dembélé has also expressed confusion about Luis Enrique's tactical approach. He feels the team's style of play is overly rigid and predictable. A well-informed source from the locker room says, I think Luis Enrique has lost Dembélé. Furthermore, Randal Kurumani not playing at all has raised further questions within the locker room. The players, especially the attackers, are showing more and more reluctance towards Luis Enrique's game plan. The team's play is categorized as sterile and predictable by the various members of the squad. The coach was a little too strict with some of his playing ideas, such as not using a number 9. The players started a civil war. The players couldn't take it anymore. It was 4 UCL games, where for me as a Paris Saint-Germain fan, it was clear something is wrong. And who should take the majority of the blame? It was Luis Enrique. There was still a lot of PSG fans that were complaining and putting all the critique on the players and saying Luis Enrique deserves a better squad. Luis Enrique doesn't deserve this. He's doing everything perfect. But something had to change. The players were complaining. We'll see what happens next. And at this point, Paris Saint-Germain was 17th in the Champions League table, only 4 points out of 12 points. And the next game was a tough game at the Allianz Arena against Bayern München, where Bayern hadn't lost a group stage game at the Allianz since pretty much 2017. And the game was a really tight one, but once again, Paris Saint-Germain didn't manage to get the victory, and mostly remembered for that Ousmane Dembélé red card. And Paris Saint-Germain now was sitting in 25th spot with only 4 points out of 15 points. And the bad form finally translated to Ligue 1, with Paris Saint-Germain having an extremely underwhelming 1-1 draw versus Nantes at the Parc des Princes. And this is where more reports came out. New tensions are rising between Bradley Barcola and Luis Enrique. The players frustrated with Enrique's demands and Barcola's contract extension is now on hold, reports Santi. Tensions are growing heavily between several players and Luis Enrique. Furthermore, Nuno Mendes is sometimes frustrated with his role. Luis Enrique sometimes we feel relieved to return to the national team where it's more of a free role. All the reports have mentioned several players. The only 3 players that are named by name is Nuno Mendes, Bradley Barcola, and Ousmane Dembélé. 3 of our best players, but there were other players that were complaining too. Luis Enrique, instead of listening to the players in the beginning, had this to say. The matches give me a lot of information about the players who are coming in the future. Luis Enrique will complain in private about his squad being considered too weak. So the players were saying, Lucho, this is your fault. Lucho was saying, no, this is your guy's fault. You're just too bad. You're too weak. You're too weak. But finally, after all the complaining, after all the bad performances, Luis Enrique told himself, I finally have to put my ego to the side. Justin, Luis Enrique spoke to the players yesterday during training to reduce the tensions. Lucho went with the appeasement approach and explained that everyone needs to compromise and adapt, including Lucho himself. Enrique acknowledged the fact that he needs to loosen up a bit with the players and he was ready to do so. The players were surprised to see Enrique take the step forward to calm the tensions, but they all appreciate it very much. The club's management has always remained fully in support of Luis Enrique. The players now also want to pull in the same direction and start winning games. Luis Enrique also spoke with the club's management at the end of last weekend. Both sides agreed on one point. They need to be more positive and move forward together. So what happened was Luis Enrique finally gave up on the football he was trying to play since the beginning of the season. He had hampered Paris Saint-Germain's season and put us in such a difficult spot where we pretty much had to win all of our next 3 remaining games in the Champions League to qualify for the knockout stages. And this was the perfect time to do it. Luis Enrique had seen 5 games of his tactics. It just didn't work. And I have to thank and appreciate all the Paris Saint-Germain players, because till this day, I still don't know if the players were not complaining, if the players did not do this, I don't know if Luis Enrique would have put in his ego to the side. Maybe he would have just sunk the ship and potentially accepted defeat at the end. But thankfully, Luis Enrique, and I prop him for this, he finally came to an understanding that this doesn't work. And everything that was said ever since the Girona game was proven to be right. Luis Enrique was trying to play football that just wasn't working, whether it's with the current PSG players or other players he could have bought to the club. It just wasn't working. He finally accepted that, and that's where the form started. I realized that uploading a video, Paris Saint-Germain are back. This is why I always say, like, sack Lucho, because I never expected him to put his selfishness and egoistic, personality to the side. Obviously, it could be pressure from Nasser Khalifi to tell Luis Enrique, come on, Lucho. It's the entire team that don't like how you play football. You got to do something. But yeah, that he says something like that he has to compromise and adapt for the team. I mean, I love to hear it. This is exactly what we've been, saying for such a long time with Luis Enrique. Enrique acknowledged the fact that he needs to loosen up a bit. Wow. So us losing all of the games in the UCL, all of that didn't make Lucho acknowledge that he has to loosen up a bit. It was the players basically doing a revolution inside of the club that made Luis Enrique understand the situation. The players also now want to pull in the same direction and start winning games. This could be the game changer. Now, the players were really unhappy about one thing. Their fire to play for Luis Enrique, to fight for him. But now that Lucho has done this, this could be a restart in the season. This could be a major restart in the season. Lucho does some adaptations. The players fight even harder. I'm so excited, man. This is amazing news. This is perfect news. Superb news. The first game back was just a 0-0 draw versus Auxerre. Not the best, but I immediately noticed Paris Saint-Germain playing more direct, playing more counter-attack, more freedom for the attackers, happier faces. And this was just the first game out of many games, because the improvement started from there, both in the league, in the cups, and obviously the Champions League. First game back was versus Salzburg, obviously an opponent we should beat, but Girona, PSV, and Atletico Madrid, in their form there were also teams we should have beaten easily, and Paris Saint-Germain started the game beautifully, getting the first goal. Then it was a bit stale, and we managed to get the 2 goals at the end in the second half and moved up to 25th spot. But this is what we needed. We needed the improvement. We needed to take a step forward. And at this point, despite the good Salzburg game, we'd only scored 5 goals in 6 games with 7 goals allowed, 11 XG created, but only 5 goals scored and 6 goals conceded from 4.4 XG against. It was terrible from Paris Saint-Germain in their first 6 Champions League group stage games. And if you compare this to previous Champions League campaigns, it was one of the worst goals against ever. It was the second in worst with wins since last season. It was one of the worst XG, the worst goal difference we've ever had since 12-13. The second best possession, the second to lowest XGA ever, the second lowest points compared to last season, and the second lowest goals scored. Something had to happen immediately because it just wasn't working. This entire Champions League campaign, despite the XG and despite the missing chances, Paris Saint-Germain just wasn't performing at the level it should have been performing. And Paris Saint-Germain continued that form as I said, in the league games, in the cup games, until we faced Manchester City in the Champions League. And this was the game to prove, are we actually there? Despite City being, as I said, a weak side and not being themselves this season, this was still a tough game. And City had a 2-0 advantage after 53 minutes. Mistakes by the Paris Saint-Germain defense. But shout out to Paris Saint-Germain, who immediately came back and showed that they were ready. This showed me that yes, Paris Saint-Germain are a different team than the beginning of the season. And especially when you look at the goals we scored, it was from transition, it was from counter-press, it was individual brilliance and freedom from Bradley Barcola and Ousmane Dembélé, who came off the bench. Joao Neves capped up of an unbelievable 40-minute performance after City scored their second goal, giving us the victory, and Paris Saint-Germain moved all the way up to 22nd place in the Champions League. Then came the Stuttgart game. This was a game to just complete what we've done ever since the Auxerre game. Ever since the decision from Luis Enrique to move away from the disgusting Premier League robotic tactics, and Paris Saint-Germain with another great performance. Ousmane Dembélé was the magician in this game, scoring a hat-trick. And as I said, Ousmane Dembélé was the main person that had the main problems with Luis Enrique. But ever since Luis Enrique and Dembélé himself compensated, both have never looked back. Both have never been better. Luis Enrique has never been better, and Ousmane Dembélé has definitely never been better. And Paris Saint-Germain managed to advance 15th place in the Champions League with only 13 points. We scored 11 goals in those 3 games after the decision was made and 3 goals allowed. 8.4 XG, but 11 goals scored and only 3 goals allowed from 2.7 XG. Every single player in this team performed much better since that decision. It's not a coincidence that that's when Paris Saint-Germain started playing like Paris Saint-Germain. The beginning of the season until the Auxerre game was an experiment from Luis Enrique that totally failed. But luckily, we're first in the Ligue 1, we're still in the Coupe de France, into the quarterfinals, we won the Trophée du Champion, and we have advanced to the Champions League knockout stages, which is the most important thing. I really don't care that we're not in top 8 and we're going to play a round of 32 game and everything. What I care about is Luis Enrique came to his senses, our players saved the season, our players rescued the season. And that is the main reason why Paris Saint-Germain were so lackluster in the beginning of the season. It was a totally failed experiment from Luis Enrique that luckily, instead of waiting until the end of the season to move away from, he moved away from it at the perfect moment. We're still competing in every single competition. We have like a 13-point gap at the top of Ligue 1. We've already won the Trophée du Champion, as I mentioned, quarterfinal in the Coupe de France, and I'm very confident about the rest of the UCL campaign this season. Thank you, Luis Enrique, and thanks to every single Paris Saint-Germain player that have saved the season. That's been it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, but hopefully I've answered why Paris Saint-Germain saved their Champions League season. That's been it from boy PSG, and as usual, allez Paris.